Morning, real estate fans. Alice Lema here, broker John L. Scott, beautiful Southern Oregon, with another edition of the weekly podcast. Today, we're going to talk about low appraisals again. Volatility in the market. Appraisals are at risk during downturns. I've got 5 things you can do, things to talk about, just in case that happens to you. So in the meantime, let's give you a quick second to subscribe to the channel, thumbs up, leave some comments, questions, always here to help. And again, if you need to speak to me privately during the weekend, you can text or call this number floating up here somewhere, 541-301-7980. And we'll talk about your particular real estate needs. Okay, back to the podcast. Volatile market, appraisals at risk during downturns. Here's 5 things you can do to be ready and be successful. So first, let's just start by saying volatility creates risk of appraisals coming in low as markets transition down. Now, cash buyers, just as a side note, are the ones that drive markets up and down both. So during the big crash, the cash buyers were coming in low. They were securing the deal that reset the neighborhood for 6 months, and it just kind of cascaded down that way. But markets go up that way. That's how we had our recent spike during the COVID and during our fires here in Southern Oregon. The cash buyers came in, they didn't have an appraisal, and so they got to secure the property at the price they could afford, hence another 6 months. Everybody else has to use that as the new comparable. So that's kind of how the markets go up and down. We have been in an active adjusting. We're trying to moderate. It's happening nationwide. We're off of our highs. So this volatility, one of the outcomes of that is the appraisals are coming in low. Some of them are coming in low by a lot. Some are coming in low by a little. So here's what you do. Number 1, be objective from the beginning. We always talk on this podcast how being prepared helps alleviate all these dramatic scenarios. So be objective from the start. Whether you're buying or selling, check the closed values in the area you're looking. You have a target property in mind, whether you're selling or buying. Be honest. Don't fluff it up in your mind and say it's better, it's worse, when it's actually not. You have to be really, really, truly honest and realistic. And then you can avoid the drama from the beginning. Because if you know that, if you're buying and you know that that house is too high and the seller is just hopeful, and you write an offer and it gets accepted, you are putting yourself at risk, buyers. And if you're selling, you already know it's too high, and your agent might have even told you, but you wanted to test it out. So there's pros and cons to those scenarios. You know, we use those strategies sometimes deliberately, but here we're talking about in a low appraisal situation. Here's how to avoid it from the beginning: is be honest and be true to what the market is telling you for the target property. Okay. Number 2, be prepared to negotiate either way, because appraisals sometimes, even with best efforts from the beginning, sometimes appraisals will come in low and it's the appraiser who has the final say. So be prepared just in case. In a normal to slow market, the market conditions create more flexible sellers. The sellers are more likely to make up some of the difference in a low appraisal, if not all of a shortfall. In a hot market, buyers, you hear stories, they're the ones that have to make up the difference and overpay. But if you're buying, line up some extra cash. If you don't have a, line up somebody who does. Talk to your lender about that, just so you know you don't get in trouble moving money in and out of your account without them knowing. But have some access to extra cash just in case. Even if you know everything looks like it should be fine, it doesn't hurt to have that. And if you are selling, and even if you know you're priced right, especially if you know you're not priced right, but either way, have some wiggle room in your equity budget as a seller so that you can make up a difference or part of a difference and just move on to close the sale. So that's number 2, is be prepared to negotiate with some money on the side if you are a buyer, and some wiggle room in your equity if you are a seller, but just be prepared. So number 3, when there is a low appraisal, the appraisers usually offer some number of days. It's not very long. It can be sometimes 2-3 days. I've seen them be 10 in some situations, but the appraisers will sometimes offer a rebuttal period for the listing and buyer's agent to come up with possibly other comparables that the appraiser might have missed. Now, this does not usually work. Every once in a while it does, but it's rare. So don't get your hopes up. If there's a rebuttal period, do your best, but go back to number 2, and that's be prepared either to throw in some money if you're a seller or bring in some money if you're a buyer. But going back to number 3, use that rebuttal period. Just because Alice said it doesn't usually work doesn't mean you shouldn't try. You should always try, because once in a blue moon it does. And we want to check every option before we go into final negotiations. Okay. So that's number 3, is the appraisers will give you a rebuttal period. Use it regardless of how likely or unlikely it is. Number 4, sometimes buyers and properties qualify for a waiver being they don't have to do the appraisal at all. So, and it doesn't matter if you're on the buyer side or seller side, either agent can call the lender and just say, hey, how likely is it that this person might actually end up with a waiver? Because they don't tell you ahead of time. You can ask, and that's a good idea if you are a buyer, especially ask your lender, like, do I have a 50-50 chance of being granted a waiver in the middle of my escrow? 80% chance, 0 chance. It wouldn't hurt to know, because you could use that in your negotiation with your offer, just saying, hey, I have this much of a chance. Let's see what happens. Take my offer. And then if you're a selling agent, you can call the lender and just ask the same question. What are the chances? Now, what happens is after you go into escrow, after you have your negotiation and accepted offer, that's when we find out is when the lenders first starts working on the loan. Because there's an escrow, that's when we usually get the call or an email saying, oh, we don't want to go out and look at the house. It's all fine. Well, that's a very exciting moment. The only downside is that now the buyer doesn't have that physical third party eyeballs on the house, double checking the condition and double checking the neighborhood and all that. They either did it on their computer, or they just said, you're putting so much down, or the house is so sellable. If we get it back in foreclosure, it doesn't matter. You don't have to do an appraisal. It's not all good when the appraiser does not come out, but it sure makes the deal go through. And then again, that's the new price of the neighborhood for 6 months. So that's number 4. And then number 5, remember, it's a negotiation. When appraisal comes in low, the buyer has the right to go, I don't want to negotiate. The appraisal came low. I'm out. You can do that. The seller has the right to say, I'm not bringing in the money. I'm not lowering the price. I want to go back on the market and try again. That doesn't usually work real well, because now you kind of know the value. Any other appraiser is going to put the house, right about that point anyway, unless there's some drastic market shift right immediately. And also the seller has the right to go, I don't want to play ball. I don't want to sell right now. And in those situations, the buyer can enforce the contract by addressing the appraisal, making up the difference. You can make those negotiations happen and still move forward with a closing. But buyers, you should know it's not automatic that the seller's going to go, boom, here you go, I'm dropping the price. That is normally what we do, especially in a neutral market or a slow market. The seller often will come down. But, every seller is different. Every buyer is different. And if you're buying and you're kind of lukewarm about the house and you're thinking, maybe not the right house for you, and then the appraisal comes in low, there's your escape hatch. So it's always best to know how you feel about the house, how you truly feel about the house early. That's always better than waiting or having an epiphany after the fact, like, oh, I don't really want this. Better to have those moments early before you write your offer. But if you're in the middle of escrow and this happens, for the buyers, it can be an escape hatch, and the sellers, you should know that. And then for the seller, they might not want to play ball. They might want to just put a renter in there, take it off the market, or do something else. So those are the 5 things to try if you have a low appraisal. They frequently work out. It's rare, just so you know, it's rare that there's not some meeting of the minds in some fashion. Most people, when they're buying and selling and they're in the middle of escrow, they pretty much know they want to move forward. That's our podcast for today. If you need any help, give me a call, 541-301-7980. It's up there. Would love to be your agent. I'm a great listing agent, great buyer's agent. Do a lot with investment properties, first-time home buyers, always very fulfilling. Riverfront property, rural property, and yeah, and some raw land. We do that too. So that's it for this week. Have a beautiful weekend. Hug those you love. We'll see you next time. Bye now.